First of all, thank you all for coming here today. I appreciate you taking time to come to discuss how we can optimize partnership opportunities, not only domestically but globally. I am here with a great group of guests today, a stellar group of professionals in the partnership and innovation areas. We're talking to them later today. First, I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Erran Persley. I'm the Commissioner for Economic Development for the state of Kentucky. Proud to be here today. Some of you have seen your programs and realized I am not Secretary Stephen Pryor. He apologizes that he could not be here today. He's with the state of Rhode Island. They are having their legislature meet today on the budget, and he got called back home yesterday to testify before his legislature. So for better or worse, you have me today for this discussion. So let's get started. I want to just say, first of all, many of us in this room have talked about how we can maximize or optimize partnerships, both from the business and private sector level. This becomes something we constantly think about and trying to find the ways that we can really figure out the best practices in doing that. How do we shape those partnerships for innovation in the private sector moving forward? I come from a state where we have just begun in the state of Kentucky to think about how we can start to optimize and innovate in terms of small business and big business in our state. In fact, 2 years ago, we created a thing called the Entrepreneurship Innovation Department within our cabinet. That group is fully focused on trying to commercialize the research that happens at our universities. We have lots of research happening across the state of Kentucky. For years, that research has not gone to that commercial level. We're now focusing on how to commercialize exactly those types of products that are coming out of our universities in partnership with our public and private partners. We have also seen, all of us, partnerships that worked and didn't work. And these panels are going to tell us how you find those pitfalls in what really works, what doesn't work, how can you make your partnerships better. As we approach a more global economy, the realization is this: our partnerships have to cross national, international lines. How do we begin to work with our research partners across the globe to figure out ways to best maximize our partnerships for innovation and for growth within our states, within our countries, as we move forward? And so what I'm going to do now is not take too much time. I'm going to introduce our distinguished panel of guests that we have here today. We're going to engage in an honest conversation about how we can truly optimize our partnership opportunities. So first, I will introduce Barbas. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for Nestlé USA. Joined Nestlé in 2007 and is now in charge of corporate strategy and enterprise transformation programs in the areas of growth acceleration, new business ventures, new capabilities, agile organizations and structures, and profit ROI optimization. Please join me in welcoming Barbas.
Thank you.
Also on the stage with us today is Mr. Ronn Cort, the COO and President of SEKISUI SPI. Did I say that correctly?
Close enough.
Close enough? Ronn is passionate about the transformation power of America's intergovernmental manufacturing workforce and how this workforce has quickly embraced quick response manufacturing. He has 15 years of international business development experience in the US, Switzerland, South Africa, China, and Japan. Please welcome Ronn Cort. To my left also, we have Dr. Matt O'Keefe, Executive Director for the Center for Manufacturing Excellence, the University of Mississippi. Matt is also a professor of chemical engineering. He began his career by working at AT&T Microelectronics, AT&T Bell Laboratories, and the Air Force Research Laboratory. As Executive Director, Matt's research focuses on processing, characterization, and the industrial application of thin films and coatings. Thank you. Please welcome Dr. Matt O'Keefe. And last but not least, we have Dr. Michael Salgaller, Supervisory Invention Development and Marketing Specialist for the National Institutes of Health, NIH. Michael leads the Invention Development and Marketing Unit within NIH. Here, Michael leverages over 20 years of business and scientific investment experience to support technology, development of commercialization, Prior to his current role, Michael's experience includes time as a long-term industry executive in boutique professional services and early-stage biotechnology firms, a member of the investment team for a venture capital firm dedicated to healthcare, and as a senior staff scientist at the NIH. Please welcome Michael. I'm going to start with the general question to all the panelists here. We'll start at the end and work our way back toward this way. In general, please tell me about what kinds of partnerships we're talking about today that work well and the partnerships that don't work so well. And give us some examples of why they work well and why they don't work well. Please.
Perfect. Then first and foremost, thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here. Work for Nestlé, as Erran mentioned. Before I answer the question on what are the core areas that are critical for partnerships is, represented here the private sector, a large company like Nestlé. Partnerships play a fundamental role in our strategy, in the way we develop our business. And it's not just a one and done ad hoc approach, it's more of a capability we are building. And that's part of the success, in my view, when it comes to partnerships. Partnerships or successful partnerships these days in the private sector come in many ways, shapes, and forms. Not just the traditional that you might be more accustomed to when it comes to partnerships with universities and research institutes for foundational research, as well as partnerships with vendors of ingredients and packaging materials for product development, for instance. But there are new and emerging models of partnership. There are models of partnership that, for instance, my company is highly vested into, which is partnering with players or competitors in the same industry. Examples is creation of incubators in specific areas of the US, creating innovation ecosystems where competitors come together to work with startups on specific consumer challenges. Also, big partnerships across competitors like, a company like Starbucks and Nestlé coming together and creating a worldwide partnership for marketing, selling, distributing coffee. This was probably unthinkable of a few years ago. Also, partnerships when it comes to business model development and technology development. Think about, in my industry of food and beverage, the impact of direct-to-consumer, the impact of smart kitchens going forward. Very quickly, not 10 years down the road, 2-3 years down the road, your pantry, your fridge, and your oven will be fully automated. You won't hardly have to touch any appliance. So those are partnerships that are being created. Also in the areas of sustainability, in areas such as renewable energies, as well as reusable packaging. Those are new type of partnerships being formed. Last but not least, certainly, when it comes to workforce deployment. And for instance, one of the examples I have in my company is a partnership with the public sector when it comes to reintegrating veterans once they retire from successful military careers with tremendous skill sets that can be used in the private sector. So partnerships take, at least in the private sector, take very different ways, shapes, and forms. And there are a few core elements that are critical for success, in my view. A clear alignment to your strategy, doesn't matter if you're in the private sector or in the public sector, common objectives and common goals for the partnership, a very clear mechanism to create, track, and share the value being created by the partnership. If this condition is not in place, partnerships typically fail. More often than not. Last but not least, having a clear mechanism of trial and error among partners. So successful partnerships like some of the ones I mentioned, at least in my company, have these key success factors in place. When you miss one of these, it's typically a recipe for disaster in my experience.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think to follow along with that, I think that there's a continuum from the university or education side of the types of opportunities you can partner with, right? That can be in very small areas and very niche. Can be almost one-on-one. Then you can go on the other side, which you were talking about, where you have competitors, a consortium, right? A pre-competitive consortium that are very successful in many universities, where you think companies that would normally not be together can come together because they all have the same problem and don't have the resources to solve that fundamental problem. So I think that underneath that space, there's probably two areas I would categorize them from a university, especially from the US, that's available to everyone. One is, again, on the technology intellectual property side, right? Universities do fundamental research. They do scholarly research. We develop graduate students. We can develop things for you. We can solve problems. We can address problems. We can look at problems that you don't have. We're really an opportunity for a resource, an outside resource for that. The other side of that is on the workforce. It's really on the development of people. That's, at the end of the day, universities and community college and all, we really develop talent. And that talent needs to be developed for their career. And that career can't be done in a vacuum. We need to have your input. We need to have you as collaborators and partners. And so in that case, there's an opportunity to come in and be a collaborator or partner, to sponsor anything from as simple as coming to a classroom and giving a lecture or giving a talk on what your company does. That not only will help us build the workforce, it also helps you to recruit those students. That's really important. If you take away nothing else, at least in U.S. universities, if the first time you show up to hire someone is the first time you showed up, it's very difficult to get across to the students. They do not connect with you. That is something I've seen over my last 20 or so years in academia, where just having a name isn't enough. You have to have a presence, that they have to know you. Small companies that come all the time, that give talks, that'll buy pizza, that'll sponsor field trips. Those are a wonderful way of getting to know the students as well as the university. And from in that, you can figure out where to partner and how to partner best.
Well, I'm gonna scale that to give you an idea of what we do. We're a small manufacturer, $200 million manufacturer in North America, but we're part of a large $11 billion global chemical company, SEKISUI Chemical. What we've got is, we're a classic industrial manufacturer. What's going on in the world today is this rapid rate of change, and as a manufacturer, we've got to get ahead of that. So our partnerships are critical to that. And I've kind of listed down some things how we connect, and we're in central Pennsylvania, relatively rural area. So we've got a great relationship with the state, with the economic and community development, Pennsylvania Economic and Community Development Partnership. That gives us insight into what's coming in terms of what companies or larger companies, potentially suppliers or customers, are moving in. That gives us some line of sight to where we need to be in maybe 5 or 10 years. And then we work a lot with the regional and local economic development groups. I'm here as a guest of a group called Focus Central PA, which is really regional development. So this whole regional idea that as a manufacturer, we can't just depend on our in a rural area, we can't depend just on the immediate workforce. We've got to spread our wings a little bit and get to a larger environment, and those are critical for that. And then workforce development boards. These are tremendous. We're in a position now where we can't find people. We have to create people. We have to dig deep into the schools. And so these workforce development boards help us not only develop the existing workforce, but also reach down into high schools, vocational schools, and actually into elementary schools. So we're actually having partnerships with even local grammar schools, elementary schools, high schools, to actually get our name out there, to get them to understand what manufacturing jobs look like, what careers look like, and then develop the soft skills. We've got to develop these people, and in return, what we do is as we develop these people, we also develop these communities. So that community partnership becomes a really important part, especially in manufacturing. There's a belief about manufacturing that it's all being offshored. And as jobs and manufacturing renaissance takes place in North America, those partnerships to get that message out and get that story out becomes critical. And then the universities. So we've got a couple great universities near us, and we're connected red thread into those universities at all levels, whether it be programs or sponsorships, scholarships, to take the long view. From a partnership standpoint, I want to talk about things that don't work well. Things that don't work well are when things get caught up in bureaucracy. We've got some manufacturing-led partnerships in central Pennsylvania where the manufacturers get together, not within a particular industry, but across all industries, and we actually get in the driver's seat and then work with the public partners to help them figure out where they should be allocating their resources so they're not duplicating efforts. We've seen a lot of that where there's like duplication of efforts across different economic or workforce development boards. We try and drive that as a manufacturing group to make sure that our time, energy, and efforts are being done quickly and effectively.
Thank you.
So the National Institutes of Health, we're part of 80 federal labs in the United States, and our particular one is the largest biomedical research institute in the world. We have about 20,000 people, about 8,000 scientists. We also have the largest clinical investigation center in the world at any one time. We have around 1,100 clinical trials going on, and the one thing they have in common is that they're all what's called first in human, which is they've never been tried in people before. So the challenge that we have is the need to partner, not just from a business or economic development standpoint, but because of the fact that our particular sector is so time and capital intensive. Depending on what you read, it depends. It usually takes between 7 and 10 years to get a medical product to market, and costs anywhere between $500 million and $1 billion. So the timelines and the capital intensity make it paramount that you partner, because it isn't just you don't have all the skill sets necessary, but you're not going to have the workforce and the economic clout to go all the way. So we're also the largest funder of basic research. We provide about $35 billion US every year to research institutes and universities all over the world. And then we have about 10% of that we keep on campus in Maryland, which I sort of call our management fee. And so that funds research on campus that is available for licensing with companies and also with partnerships. So it's interesting that as the largest biomedical research center, our mission includes improving public health, so things like addressing the fact there are more smokers in China than there are people in the United States, and addressing vaping by teenagers in the US and nutrition in third world countries. So we've got a huge public health mandate. But our mission also includes facilitating economic development, which to me, having both been on the NIH side and the buy side, was really interesting when I saw that. So the way that we foster both technology and economic development is through the partnerships that we develop. And what makes a good partner is one that understands how truly strange the healthcare sector is. I teach a class on entrepreneurship at NIH, and I go through a little exercise with the class where I ask them the first day to raise their hand if they own a cell phone, and of course everybody's hand goes up. Then I say, well, leave your hand in the air if you know who makes your cell phone. And everybody's hand stays up. I'm like, okay, part 2. Put your hand in the air if you are or ever have been on a prescription drug, and everybody's hand goes up. Now, leave your hand in the air if you know who makes your prescription drug, and everybody's hand comes down. So how is it you know who makes your phone, but something keeping you alive, you have no idea? It's because you're not the customer. That's what's the really weird space. You're developing these drugs, these devices, and the people who are going to use the product are not the customer. So that's one weird space. The other is that you can generate a lot of economic development from the promise of what your product could do. Because we're regulated, you are actually forbidden in the US from selling your product until you have the proper regulatory approval. And our last company that was founded using our technology was acquired for $11 billion. At the time it was acquired, it had no approved products. So it had no customers, it had no sales. In fact, it wasn't allowed to sell anything. So there aren't that many sectors that you could be acquired, let alone for $11 billion, and have no sales and no customers. So that's what's really, so companies that understand that work best. What doesn't work as well is companies that don't understand some of the limitations we have as a federal agency. So there are certainly legal agreements, like any of the gentlemen on the panel would need to negotiate and sign for that partnership. And as a federal agency, there's just some things that we cannot agree to. And some companies feel that they are negotiating tactics. So we try to tell them, if you don't see a provision in the agreement that you would like to see, it's not a negotiating tactic. We're not allowed to do it. So the ones that work well kind of get that, and so we're able to move forward.
Great. Let me say one thing before I move on. Michael, that analogy of the cell phone and the drug maker, it's incredible, and I'm going to steal that one from you, so thank you for that. Rhea, I want to go back to you for a second. What does a private sector actor like Nestlé look for in a kind of innovation ecosystem? What are the things that you look for in that kind of ecosystem?
Sure, I mean, and it links to what's required these days to drive innovation. If you drive an innovation-led growth model, as is the case we try to do at my company, innovation has become much more multidimensional. By multidimensional, I mean there are many more variables that you need to factor in when you think about innovating the value proposition for your consumer, for end user. If you think about the business of food and beverage, you think about the disruption going on with the new delivery models, e-commerce, advanced analytics impacting the way you do manufacturing, and that list goes on and on and on. It did become indeed a multidimensional innovation ecosystem. So what we require when it comes to local and regional innovation ecosystems is an ecosystem that is holistic and is multidisciplinary, that it's not just a few vendors and a few manufacturers coming together, but are key players coming together across the whole value chain. Because innovation these days happens in a much more holistic way than it used to happen 5-10 years back.
Thank you. And so Ron, to you, talking about manufacturing, what are some of the barriers and advantages of building a partnership in the manufacturing sector or industries?
In general, I think our experience is that manufacturers have a bias towards action. They like to move forward, like to get things done pretty quickly. And so the best partnerships that we have are partnerships that tend to look at small successes and celebrate those small successes, but also not hang on too much to things that they're struggling with. We're very comfortable with being quick to fail. So that learning experience for us becomes really critical. We're very happy to say, yeah, we tried it, didn't work, let's move on to the next thing. Sometimes that can be challenging in public partnerships because they're trying to hit a certain set of metrics or a certain result. And we as manufacturers definitely want to focus more towards the, not so much the metrics, but the result. And so that definitely, as a manufacturer, that speed, that kind of rapid iteration, that's critical to our success. And we look for partners that can help us do that. And one of the ways that we often talk about this, we've got a next generation, if you've not seen these, are next generation manufacturing partnerships. And these are industry-led or the manufacturing-led, where the manufacturers sit at the center of the table and the public partners sit on the outside. And those partnerships are really effective because that allows us as manufacturers to get together and say, we have common issues. And we get together and then actually delegate and help those public partners figure out how to put the resources into our region to help us move more quickly. We often talk about that we would much rather have progressive improvement than delayed perfection. So we're very happy with these kind of small victories. I think that's the biggest part of that. And the barrier is for us sometimes is when there's a lot of public partners competing with one another for whether it be state or government resources to try and get them together at the table and recognize that we've got to pool those resources to the best that we can as manufacturers.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So Matt, this question is for you. And I'm sure everyone's interested in hearing this. You know, we often talk about this abundance of resources that are available for partnerships. Okay, can you please talk to us about those resources that are available and how the private sector can take advantage of those resources that are available, or what are we missing out on that higher education has to offer in resources to our companies and our partnerships?
Right. I think the university system in the U.S. has tremendous resources. And in fact, part of those resources are available if you partner directly with industry. There are many times for those of us who, on a traditional faculty side, write proposals, have to go out and get external funding, where having partners is an integral part of being able to secure those resources and do that. So there's that aspect of just being a partner and getting together and being truly a co-collaborator. I've had a number of those in my career. But in terms of the resource side, we were talking before we started about how universities often have a lot of analytical equipment or those types of equipment that we can get through programs such as National Science Foundation every year has a major research and instrumentation program where we can go and get these very expensive pieces of equipment that are otherwise very difficult for us. But then we have the staff and we have the students to be able to man and operate those and to do that. But in order to make that work, we need to have more business, we need to have more collaborators to do that. And that's where industry can come in and be a big part of that, where you can utilize that, where you can do that. In fact, just as an example, I had one company that had gotten capital from their corporate to expand their research and development. And as they were looking at how they were going to spend that, they came to a university that I was at the time, and they looked at what equipment we had. And we were in close proximity to them, and they said, well, we're not going to buy, they had actually thought about buying similar equipment to what we had, and they said, that isn't the best use of our money. You have that. And so then they would send us and just utilize the equipment, which wasn't utilized 100% of the time. We started using things nights and weekends and other things that can do that, but that helped us. And they put their resources into other aspects saying, nope, they've already got that covered. And that was great. And then they started sending students in order to do that. They started hiring students as graduate students. They would hire them after undergraduate, hire them as their employee, but then send them back to use that equipment to make sure it was utilized and do that. So there's a lot of resources that are really available to that. On the other side is the resource we really have is the students, right? Whether it's junior college, even high school. There's any number of manufacturers that we work with in Mississippi who have now started high school apprenticeship programs, and we utilize even those in our program at the University of Mississippi, where they recognize they have to get into the schools and to do what Ron was talking about, to partner with them. But they provide them with not just the opportunity to work, it's the opportunity to learn and to get reinforcement. The biggest resource we can do is to let the students know that there's an impact in their work. And I think that's where manufacturing has a real tangible output and positive income. The students, any number of times when we take our students to the factory floor, as we call it, or we take them to manufacturing locations, we'll sit there and say, this is a real problem they need to solve. They don't have enough people, or they need some new ideas. We had a major manufacturer just call us up a couple weeks ago and say, we have a new product, it's being launched, we're having problems, we really would like you to send over 5 students to come look at it for a morning. We'll buy them lunch, and we would just want to hear what they have to say, because we think we're missing something. So there's a resource that perhaps people don't think about, but it's always on that workforce and talent. And I think that's what universities and schools in general, education system, really can provide.
Perfect. And since you mentioned workforce, let's transition to workforce. As me in this room know, the advantage of having a booming economy in the U.S. is that we have a booming economy. The disadvantage is that we have the lowest unemployment rates we've had in quite some time. And so there's this workforce issue, not only for immediate workforce, but our workforce for the future. So my question to the panel is, how can public and private sector groups work together to develop these workforce development strategies for the jobs of the future? How do we prepare for that? And I'll start at the end with Ree.
Sure. I mean, it's like you mentioned, I think all of us touch upon the importance of workforce development and talent for the future. I think when it comes to private sector, is being really clear in partnership with the public sector, universities, research institutes, whatever it might be, when it comes to what we believe are the future needs what are the needs for the workforces of the future. But perhaps as importantly, also what are the needs for the current workforce to take them to the future. It's not just about the future generations, so that's obviously very, very important, but also, and I see this challenge in my own company, the world is changing fast around us, and our talent needs to adapt really, really fast. I think, even in the private sector these days, the budgets of internal departments focus on learning and organizational development, in other words, training the workforce, are in the hundreds of millions of dollars across America, if not billions of dollars, let alone the investment being done by the public sector. So I think this is clearly an area where private and public need to come together and have a common North Star. What are we trying to prepare the workforce for? And at the same time, how do we take the current workforce for the future?
Yeah, I think to leverage off of that, there's a couple of things. On the working professional side, I think universities and schools can provide that. I know in particular I had a similar type where a very large multinational corporation that normally did an internal training session to teach some of their technical STEM field about a particular aspect of their business, manufacturing business, that really wasn't well known, but they needed to get it. It was really more of a manufacturing issue that they needed to get to the design people, and they didn't have time. They used to teach it internally. Cuts, budgets, time, they didn't have it, and they came to our university and said, look, you're in the business of teaching. Can you put together for us not just an online, but an actual presentation? They came to me and said, could you take our information, could you distill it down, could you present it to it like you do to your class, which is what they ended up recording, and then make the online aspect so that we know that we don't have time to do that, but then in a modular format, they can sit there at lunch and take the class and do that. They can take it when they're on the airplane. They can take it as they go through that. And then at some level, they're assured, the company is, that they've at least seen this information that otherwise wouldn't be able to do. A university is well suited for that. We all have a lot of distance capabilities. That's on the working professional side. I think on terms of the students themselves, I mentioned it briefly, one of our programs that we have in ours at the Center for Manufacturing Excellence, we recognize that the best way to get the workforce developed is to get them on the factory floor, to get them on the manufacturing line. And it's not just to immerse them in that and learn the technical aspects, it's also to learn as the soft skills, which I heard somebody in academia call essential skills this year. So I like that term. It's essential skills. How do you communicate, right? How do you walk up to somebody, in our case, we're a four-year institution, so the people come through our program, which is in engineering, accountancy, and business. We have a cohort that goes through, they get a minor degree in manufacturing, but then they have their major, engineering, accountancy, and business. But we take any of those out onto the factory floor or the production line. How do they talk to somebody who has a two-year degree, or somebody who has a high school equivalency, or who doesn't have a degree, and yet has a tremendous, vast knowledge that they need to learn and impart? And so then they have to work in terms of workforce development. They're helping to develop the other people on the line as the skill sets come in. And as we come up with artificial intelligence and all the other things, that's just going to accelerate. But there's still that human nature aspect to it. So I think from the university standpoint, communication, learning those essential skills, and being able to convey that in a technological world is really where we're at.
That's great. This workforce development is probably what I'm most passionate about. It's a tremendous opportunity. We have 3 manufacturing campuses. I serve 4 generations. I've got 4 generations to look after with all very distinct needs. And so how we manage that with our public-private partnerships is that, imagine our typical employee, production worker employee, might show up at our door at 18 years old, where his mom and dad says, out of the basement, you have to go get a job. And they show up, they've got very few hard skills, they've got almost no essential skills, and they're dropped at our door, and with a 3.2% unemployment, we'll take them in. And then our obligation to them begins. And that obligation means to stay with them, develop them. We've got our in-house training, which we get tremendous support from our workforce development partners to do. Again, it's primarily driven on the soft skills. The hard skills are easy to teach. With the advent of automation, they've got to be really flexible. They've got to be able to do many different skills, many different tasks, and be able to rotate through those pretty quickly. That's a big part of what we do. We reach down into, by working with the elementary schools, to start to talk to the teachers. We do a teachers in the workplace. We actually bring teachers from elementary schools into our facility. Many of them have never been to a manufacturing facility. We show them what manufacturing is like. We show them the importance of these kind of soft essential skills, and then they start to go back and work with those students in 4th, 5th, 6th grade to start to make sure they're developing the soft skills to be able to have empathy, to be able to be good listeners, to be able to make eye contact, things that they might not be learning. So by the time they move into our facility, those are kind of foundational skills that they've got with them. And then the other side of that spectrum is our employees who might be on the back end of their career, who have worked in a traditional manufacturing environment doing the same task over and over again. And what's happening is the advent of automation, things are shifting underneath them at a really kind of uncomfortable time. As you know, the skill that they had, they see this job being taken away or being replaced by automation. The partnership with our workforce development boards are critical, because what we've got to do is we've got to get them retrained late in their career. And that retraining often ends up being soft skills, ironically, let them become mentors, coaches to this emerging workforce that we're bringing in. It's a big change in that shift where there's less management, and there's more flat line communication. And so it's really, so much of that is dependent upon our relationships with the universities and our workforce development boards.
So for us, we get involved in things like internships in the junior high and high school stage, because we recognize that boys, but especially girls, can be very interested in technology at a younger age, and then sometime between then and when they start college, it's sort of sucked out of them, so they're not as interested in. So we have programs both domestically. We have a program called Fogarty, which is an international program, so we have people coming from all over the world to work with us. So the two ways I think that we help workforce development that we're a little bit less known for is the comprehensive nature of what we do and also the cross-training. So comprehensive means that for younger people who are interested in a career in some sort of healthcare or especially medical research, to realize that you have choices other than sales, or working in an academic laboratory and being the traditional academic tenure track. Those are two very fine vocations, but when I was training, that was sort of your choices. And there's a lot of ways that you can join different workforces, be it law or economic development or government affairs. There's a lot of ways you can contribute to the healthcare workforce in ways that are outside of the laboratory. The other thing that we're trying to start doing is to do more training grants. Some of the $35 billion each year we hand out each year is for training, and some of that is to expose people who have a very narrow but deep technology background to some of the other areas. For example, some of these gentlemen are involved in is, the business side. So doing medical research is great, but because it's very long and difficult, you want to do it in a way that's going to get a product to market. And it's a very lengthy and twisted process. So we're trying to cross-train so that even those that are going the traditional medical research path are doing it in a way that a commercial partner will be interested in coming along and saying, you know what, not only can we help people, but frankly, we can hire people and make some money doing that. And so the comprehensive nature and the cross-training are two ways that we're trying to help build a workforce.
Thank you. Matt, you touched on this earlier, so I want to dig in a little bit deeper on this subject. What is the right role or the proper role for industry to play in partnering with higher education to ensure that our young people have the right skills for today and moving toward the future in their careers?
Yeah, I think that the aspect for industry and for companies is to provide us the input on what you need. I mean, we can sometimes get focused very much in our courses and what we teach and how we've always done it in doing that. But we need to, as you were talking, the rapid change of things that are coming along, and that's just going to accelerate. We need to be more mindful of that to go through. I think a touch upon, and I did mention it earlier in terms of what works and what doesn't work in terms of university and partnerships with industry. I've had them on the research side, I've had them on the educational side. I think an important aspect to keep in mind, especially if you're not familiar with the U.S. educational system, is timing. We have a rhythm to our academic year, and that starts in kindergarten and goes all the way through the university. We have semesters or trimesters, quarters, and there are certain times that we do that. In industry, you were talking about you'd rather fail quickly than be perfect. We like to be perfect and not fail at all, and there's a fundamental problem with that. I mean, that really is an aspect of it. When you said that reminded me that probably being mindful of the fact of I personally have, mine is when an industry comes and wants to see how to interact with the university or with any kind of educational. You try to understand what the issue is, but what the timing is. Is this something you need next week, next month, next year? And then you have to fit that within, as I said at the opening remarks, there's a continuum. Can you help with next week or so? Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes that's possible, depending on what the nature is. Please come talk and do that. Sometimes there's like a semester project. We have in engineering, that's my background. Engineering, we have senior design, senior capstone projects that are either a semester or a full year, where you can have a problem that you don't have the time and energy to work on. Have some students take a look at it, right? But recognize that's going to be 4 to 8 months before you get something. You'll probably get an answer, that perhaps you wouldn't get at all because you don't have the resources to do that. Having said that, then there's also the longer term where you're looking at something, developing things in an ongoing relationship. Maybe it's multi-year, maybe it's a PhD student, which is 3 to 5 years sort of time frame. So I think that timing is a big part of figuring out how that relationship and how do you work together.
Yeah, thank you. Ron, I know you're passionate about about workforce. So I'm going to ask you this question. How do partnerships with the public sector, nonprofit organizations, universities help you achieve your workforce development goals?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a lot. This is, they have to see where we're going in the long term, because it's not how fast we work, it's how soon we start, right? So they have to really understand what our trajectory is, what markets we're going after, why we're going after them, and then what we need to do relative to that, those soft skills and those essential skills to develop those. What happens is it's a reach into those educational facilities that isn't just transactional. It's got to be from a heart standpoint. They've got to understand who we are, what we do as a company. So we open up our doors, open up those walls to allow not just the students, but the teachers and the administrators to understand what it's like to be in a manufacturing environment and the pressures of that. And our public partners are tremendous at kind of making us aware of opportunities. Things as simple as we've done STEAM events with Girl Scouts. I mean, that's not something we would normally think about. One of my favorite stories in our organization is we opened up our doors 7 years ago for our Girl Scouts to come in and see what engineering careers look like. And I find out 5 years later that one of those Girl Scouts ends up going to a local technical college for polymer engineering, and now she's interning in our facility. Right, so those are the kinds of, that's anecdotal, but those are the kinds of relationships that really need to be built to make those kinds of fundamental changes. It's this fast work, long view.
So turn to Michael for a moment. Michael, you've mentioned several times this $38 billion, I think, dollars in funding that's available out there from NIH. Can you explain more about NIH and what is your core mission at NIH?
So our core mission is to improve the quality and quantity of lives, and also to have a return on the investment that we get from the American taxpayer. We're funded by the US taxpayer, and so the intellectual property that we develop, we are supposed to get partnered and to help companies grow and get it to the patients in the market that needs it. And through that, we can take in royalties and revenue, and that supplements the research budget that we are given by the US taxpayer. And the other mission, as I said, that we have is the economic development aspect, and we do that through our industry partners. We are able to work internationally. The funding that we provide to both academic centers and small businesses around the world, any intellectual property that they develop as a result of that money, a lot of the work is basic, but some of it is applied or could be applied in many different sectors. So that intellectual property, then the university or research institute that is receiving that award can then take that technology and develop companies themselves and grow their own regional or local workforce. And they can also use that to then spin out, attract investment from risk capital, and also attract interest from the larger industry partners who, as somebody else on the panel has indicated, see as a source of innovation.
Thank you. This will be a question, then we'll go to the audience for some questions, but I'll go to the whole panel for this question once again. What is the real value proposition for these public-private sector partnerships? Like, what does that look like? What is the real value proposition at the end of the day for these types of partnerships?
I can go first. I mean, I think there are areas in terms of business development, innovation, where if you don't engage other partners in the ecosystem, it's going to be very complicated for you to succeed. And I think, for instance, what we try to do at my company is constantly have, from innovation, from a business development standpoint, a multi-horizon approach. So there are things for the short term, there are things for the medium term, there are things for the long term. And this requires a fine balance because there are short-term profit pressures versus long-term business development priorities. So these public-private partnerships allow private companies to do a lot of transformation experimentation outside of the short-term pressures. So if we didn't have this mechanism, it would be complicated for us to live by one of the mindsets we have in the company, which is perform, transform, and experiment. And this type of partnerships allow us to, in a very effective and risk-controlled way, to do transformation and experimentation for the future. So I consider a critical element for long-term development in the private sector.
Thank you.
I think the value from an educational standpoint is really talent. Now I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked for federal labs, I've been in academia. In my career, I've never had any organization walk up to me and say, we got way too many good people. Just hold off on all those. All right? We all need better people, and that's really what we're here to do. It's in the educational side, whatever level that is, right? We're here to develop that talent, and that talent needs to be developed in a way so that it comes on board and is able to produce for you as soon as possible. That we provide them with the skill set, that we provide them with whatever the knowledge, the experience in order to do that. The value is in the person, and I think. And while there's technology that goes with that, and while there's IP and all the other things that go at the end of the day, one of the most successful programs that I happen to be on with a large team developed a product that was patented, that was licensed. The company turned around and licensed, the company that licensed it turned it into a product. It now generates royalties. It's the success story you want. The most important aspect, I think, of all of that was that they hired the graduate student that really developed the technology. The company not just got the patent and the license, they got the person, right, that really was in there and did all of it, and that's what made it work. So I think the real value as we go through that is really in the person. Maybe perhaps one last thing to mention. If you're not familiar with the U.S., at least on the higher educational system, recognize there's private universities and public universities, right? And in the United States, if it's a public land-grant university, and that's a designation, a land-grant university, part of our mission is to work with outside companies, that's part of why we are there. It's a little bit different on the private side, right? They have their own endowments, resources, and all that. But those of us that work at public U.S. universities, especially if they're land grant, part of our job is to provide value to society. A lot of it started in the agrarian society and agriculture, but that's expanded out. So we have people in extension services to come visit you, to come figure out what your needs are, and so that way we can figure out what the real value we can bring to you.
So I grew up in an environment where the purpose of a business was profit, and that was the sole purpose. And so I grew up in an environment where things were being offshored, people were being downsized, and the world's changed tremendously. So for us, it's about purpose. Right? I mean, if we don't have profit, we can't have purpose. So profit's certainly part of it. But there needs to be some purpose to it. And our public-private partnerships, as a manufacturer, certainly we've got a section of our employees that work remotely, but we depend on the communities where we live and where we work. So as these people get developed, which is so critical, that becomes a strength of the community. So if I talk about the real benefit for us, it's not just what it does for our business, what it does to the communities where we're located. We have an obligation to those people to be stewards of the environment and to look after our people. And as we look after those people and make stronger communities, that allows us to attract and retain more talent and give some people some confidence. I often joke that in the US, you sign a mortgage for a home for 30 years. There's someone in my organization today on the manufacturing floor who probably signed up and purchased a house, and they've got a 30-year mortgage. And I have an obligation to that person to be there for 30 years. And so we're trying to build communities and not just businesses because they become intertwined. The stronger the community, the stronger we become.
Okay.
So the one value add that I want to touch on that I haven't yet is how not just NIH but other healthcare federal labs are contributing to the workforce in keeping them healthy and alive. So one of our greatest products that we developed and then was licensed out was Gardasil, which is the world's first preventative cancer vaccine for cervical cancer. And the thought to have a treatment that would prevent cancer is not just a medical breakthrough, but it's also was an incredible partnership between industry and government, because clinical trials, human studies, getting a product approved, it takes a long time. If it's trying to prevent something, that's going to take 5 or 10 years to show up. Even the largest pharmaceutical companies are not willing, understandably, to devote the time and resources to that type of trial. Now, once it's sufficiently de-risked, they see both the commercial and health implications, and we're very glad to get involved. So it took private-public partnership of large pharma with the National Institutes of Health to do a study that took 12 to 15 years to get enough information to get the product on the market. And now, because of that, in the US, between 10 and 20,000 teenagers will not come down in their 20s, 30s, and 40s with cervical cancer. And as a result of that, not only will they grow and they'll have families and they'll contribute to society, they will also be eligible for the workforce. And they will be contributing to the GDP, and they will be paying taxes. So the value that we have is by keeping the workforce healthy, and so that they can contribute in many sectors, not just healthcare.
Thank you. And so with those words, I will turn out to the audience so you can ask questions of our panelists. Please have questions, please walk up to the microphone and ask your question. Don't be shy. Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to ask another question.
Yes.
Please come up.
I have just a question regarding the part of the budget of, let's say, the revenue of university that are linked to a private-public partnership. Just to have an idea of what is the part that is funded by classical way and maybe non-competitive and versus what is competitive.
Right, so I believe the question is how much of our budget is set aside or designated toward working with the partnerships? Is that?
Not only, it's to be working with partnership, but also that is fundamentally granted on performance. Because basically, if you do a partnership, you get some money from the partner, you get the money if you have some sort of results.
Right.
That is a little bit different from the money that you get just for education.
Right, exactly. And that varies very widely from university to university, private to public, and also from state to state, because different states have different incentives and different programs. Some states will more heavily invest in that, others will not have as much. It's difficult to put a number on that. Technology transfer offices, which I didn't bring up, we all have those aspects. They'll have seed money, right, but to try to get those to go forward. But many cases, in my personal experience, and I'm trying to think of, at least from the engineering side, and perhaps Michael can talk more from the medical side if he's aware of it on the university, but oftentimes what we'll do is we'll partner to go get federal money, right? And so the money that we have within the university system is there to seed, to get things going so that you can go and get a larger sum of money, more likely from the federal government, because those are just larger resource, larger pots of money. But again, private university with endowments, you can think of all of those that have that. They usually typically have a little bit more leeway over how they spend it. Public universities are now getting into the things where we have it, even in our campus, we have a Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is a little bit different than fundamental research, right? This is more on the product development side. How do you have a business side? And we're funding students and organizations to try to do that. But of course, that's a seed funding where you're trying to go on to angel investors and all of the other aspects to do that. So I think it varies widely. I don't know if any of the others of you have worked enough with the universities to know how much we don't spend, unfortunately, on that. But there is money for that.
Hi, my question for Dr. Michael, NIH. I'm a scientist entrepreneur. So you just mentioned that there is partnerships around the world with NIH. I would love to hear about some stories or examples about those partnerships and how can we continue this, or how can we work with NIH on more partnerships? Thank you.
So I'll give you a really quick case study. So there was a overseas company, and they had a wearable device to measure sleep disorders. It's not just, the husband snores. It actually, severe apnea can lead to stroke or death. So for tens of thousands of people, it's pretty serious business. So the company had a great technology. What they needed to do a study in humans that show that it actually did what they claimed it would do, in order to not just get regulatory approval, but to get their next round of financing. So we were able to find among our faculty a researcher interested in working with them who had a new drug for sleep disorders. So the advantage for us internally was that we were able to recruit patients more easily because people were more willing to sign up for the study if they could do the data gathering, you could say, from the comfort of their own home. So we got to test an exciting new compound for sleep disorders, and the company got data that if it does what they claim it'll do, that they can then use to form new corporate partnerships and also to raise more risk capital.
That's right.
I would love to elaborate a little, if you could elaborate a little bit more about what each side got legally, who kept the patent. And
So I'll just be really brief. So if you come in with IP, it stays yours. If we develop new IP together, it is co-owned, but we at NIH are not allowed to do anything with it, so only the company partner gets right of first refusal, so they get first bite at the apple for the technology. And then at least at NIH, a great attraction for working with us and licensing one of our assets is that we're not permitted to take equity. And as a former VC, and on my button, I'd like 0. Most universities will take, understandably, 5 to 20% because your tech transfer office is seen as a revenue-generating source. We totally understand that business model. Because we're funded by the federal government, we have fair access provisions, so we're not permitted to serve on boards, so therefore we can't take equity. So if you're a company that's private, you and your current and potential future investors will like the fact that you can license something in from a very well-known brand in the healthcare space and not be diluted.
Can I add just something? Because I've been involved in a number of tech transfer, and some of my own patents have been licensed. In the US, I would say, at least from the university side, that's changed quite a bit over the last 25 years. It's a discussion. So again, it's kind of a continuum. It can be anywhere from the university owns it and has all of it and processed all of it, to I've been involved where the company has bought it out from the university even before we started the research. I know some public universities will allow you to pay a premium over the top of, so you fund research, right? And then this is going to cost X amount, and then you pay a bit more, and they will sign off their rights right up front. I mean, so that, right, it goes all the way in between. And I've had patents where we started with the university, again, the one that was the student that they hired, the company really wanted it to be executed, the patent and the license. They ended up paying for the license, the royalties, the patent, because they wanted it done their way, expedited, knowing that they had already agreed to the amount of what the royalty would be. So I think that there's, in the US, I think that there's a lot of leeway into how you can work with that. And that was actually funded by the federal government. It was just happy to have something that was going to be used. So.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? If there are no more questions, I'll give the panelists a second to say 30 seconds, last word, starting with Ree.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to partnerships, I mean, encouragement to think about US as a key source of partnerships. I mean, no matter if you are a foreign company or a local company. That's how my company started 100 years ago in the US. It started with partnerships. It started with acquisitions over time. This is a country where partnerships are very well developed across all players in the industry. And it's really about what you were saying before, is really about having a common purpose, having a common North Star, and finding the right partners, making sure that the value is created and shared among the partners, and definitely the right country to do this type of innovation model, so to speak, and research model going forward.
universities and higher education are open to all. And we invite everyone to come in. The more that we have to come in, the more we learn. And for an international company, think of it, it could be as simple as you need an interpreter for somebody who's going to come visit. Go visit a university, right? There's probably somebody there who can help it. It's a common courtesy. And that from there builds a relationship. So I think if you're open and reach out and know that and we know that you're there, we're always able to try to reach back out and see what it is we can do. Because ultimately, in our case, student success is our success. And that's what it's about.
I'm going to speak specifically to the regional economic development partners that are out there that work within a region, not just within the state, but within a region within a state. They are so well connected and so well networked. They know, because they've often been there a long time, it's their own community. And that's where we've got a lot of strength. Even though we're not doing foreign direct investment right now where we are, I still stay connected with those economic development teams because they know everybody. They know the history, they know where the future, and they know where to get resources pretty quickly, pretty rapidly. They're great, like at Gemba, like right at the space where things are happening. They're so good at that. So.
And just more broadly, giving a quick pitch to the Federal Lab Consortia in general, a number of people in the audience are in sectors other than healthcare. There's some in manufacturing. We have a number of federal labs in that space, aeronautics, transportation, energy, cyber, all that. And just when you're looking for who might be a logical strategic partner to look at that as an option, there are certainly unique challenges, we will admit, by working with governments that have certain provisions and challenges, but it's an option that we would like more commercial partners for.
And with that ends our program. I want to thank our distinguished panelists for being here today. Thank you for your time and for your candor. I want to thank all of you for being here and being engaged with our conversation today. I hope you have learned something or heard something that will help you to go back to communities and build stronger and better sustainable partnerships in your communities, both domestically and also internationally. And with that, I'll say goodbye and thank you all for your time.